Hey, welcome to Moving Conversations. Listen, Nora is traveling right now. She's literally playing Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, the live game. So, what I decided to do was take a look back into our archives and just see what might sound interesting. And we've talked a lot about so many different topics, but one that keeps coming up is fascia. And when looking through the archives, I saw that we had a multiple episode shows on fascia and thought, this would be a very interesting thing to revisit. So, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be bringing you those episodes once again, all about fascia. I hope you learn a lot. I was re-listening to these and reminded myself of a whole lot of information. So hopefully it'll do the same for you. And listen, please subscribe, like, do all those things that you normally would do for any podcast that you enjoy. Give us a 5-star rating if you can on Apple and whatever platform you listen on, Spotify, whatever it is. We really appreciate it. Check out the YouTube channel as well. That way you can see Nora and I doing this live on camera. And as always, you can get us at movingconvos@gmail.com or through Instagram at Moving Convos, Moving Conversations on Facebook. We'll check you out in a couple weeks live. We'll see you soon. Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are you doing?
Very well. It's just after the new year. I'm not sure when you guys are listening to this, but for us, it's just after the new year. And we're very happy to have you here. And it's, this is California in the slight winter, so it's a little gray and overcast, but otherwise doing well.
Okay, y'all have nothing to complain about the slight winter.
No, we do not.
Yes, slight is the word. Because we just had a massive storm come up yesterday. This will probably drop in 2 weeks, this podcast. So when people hear it, they can remember 2 weeks ago when we had this massive storm blow across basically from the Midwest to the East Coast. And we got lucky. All of ours was rain. But oh my gosh, the rain and wind, things were coming down sideways. And yeah, it was crazy. Thank goodness we weren't a little further north, because that much rain, we would have been socked in a blizzard, guarantee.
Yeah, no, and I heard like Philadelphia had some massive flooding, kind of worse than Hurricane Sandy. So yeah, a lot of water happening your way, a lot of crazy weather.
If anybody knows this area of Washington, D.C., and they had to close the Bay Bridge because the winds were too strong.
Oh.
Yeah. So when they have to close a massive bridge that connects, the eastern and western shore of Maryland, yeah, it was intense. And there's areas that have a shelter in place because they can't clean up fast enough. So it was pretty bad around here.
Wow. That sounds like no much fun at all.
Yeah, not much fun. But today we're going to talk about some fun stuff. Today
we are going to talk about some fun stuff.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up, not tie up. We're going to wrap up our talk on fascia. Now, when I say that, I'm saying I guarantee that we're not covering everything there is about fascia, and that we're going to revisit this, a few months down the road, 6 months, a year from now. We'll probably have new information or want to revisit this because it's such an important topic, and a topic that is in the news a lot more than it ever has been. I've had clients bring me articles from New York Times and Wall Street Journal on it. So it's now becoming more in the popular culture to talk about. So I'm sure we'll come back to it. But today it's all about, okay, we know what it is. Now, what do we do with it? How do we make it stronger? How do we train fascia? So let's jump in.
The first thing that I want to say, and this is just one of those things that I think is really important to say, is that if you are moving, you are training your fascia.
Yes.
Whether you're moving in an extreme way and you're working out every day and you're swimming and you're bicycling and you're running, or you're sitting at your desk.
Yep.
Whatever you're doing, your fascia is responding to that. And I said, creating your fascial suit based on the activities that you live in. Right? So your fascia will get tighter in the areas that need more support or that are shorter. It'll get longer in the areas that are a little more mobile or have a little bit more range. And that's just how it goes. So let's just start with that, okay? Because there are like, well, oh, you can only do this to train your fascia, only do that. It's like, no. Whatever you're doing is training your fascia. It's just what you're trying to do with your fascia and what the best way to train it is for you and for your goals.
Right. And that's a great way to put it is if you think about it, those people who do nothing, they're still training their fascia. They're training it to be tighter. They're training it to be irregular.
Yeah.
They're, deconditioning it technically, but they are, in a sense, training it to do what it's responding to what they're doing to it on a regular basis, which is nothing.
Right. Just sitting
Exactly.
at their computer, right? Or sitting watching TV or driving or whatever, right? All those things will train your body. It may not train it optimally, but your fascia will respond.
Exactly. So someone who is doing an aerobics class, for instance, technically is training their fascial suit. Someone who is doing a HIIT workout is training their fascial suit. Someone who's doing yoga. I'm just trying to think of the extremes here.
Yep.
Someone who's doing Pilates,
Absolutely.
doing whatever. They're all training it in a specific way. It just depends on how you want to train it for your goals.
Exactly. So we want to talk about a few key concepts in terms of like how people are starting to think about training fascia. And again, this is, as we talk about always, this is the beginning of this concept.
Yep.
This is, there are not a lot of studies done about the effect of certain kinds of training on the myofascial system. Those are really just starting to be worked on now. So really a lot of this is speculation, conjecture, as we say, based on what we understand as the physiology, how the fascia works. So we're making some stuff up here, people, just to be clear on that, okay?
But at the same time, just because there's no empirical evidence doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means it hasn't been proven yet.
Correct.
Or disproven yet.
Correct. I just want to make sure that
yes,
we're going off here. We're going to be talking about a few different things that we think are true based on our experience and our observation of bodies in motion over 60 plus years between the two of us. But that doesn't necessarily mean that science will bear everything we say out. Just to be clear on that.
Yep.
The first thing that I want to bring up is the idea of fascial glide. So this gets, we talked a little bit about it with the thoracolumbar fascia last week. For those who haven't joined us for all 3 sections, there's 2 more sections for this podcast. This is number 3 on fascia. And one of the things that we talked about there was that integration of the different layers of fascia, that ideally you have good, solid glide between the different layers of the tissues. Right. So, for example, very simple example, if I am bending and straightening my knee, all right, in the myofascial system, you have your quadriceps, which go around the thigh and end up at the linea aspera, right in the back line of the leg, back line of the thigh, of the femur. And then you have your hamstrings, which sit on top of that in the back. And between those, there is a layer of fascia. And there's something called intramuscular septum, which is kind of between those 2 layers of muscles. Now, those muscles act in different ways, right? One is contracting while one is lengthening. One is one is contracting. And even if they're not changing length, they're still moving in different directions potentially. And they actually move a fair ways. Excursion of muscles is much longer than you would think. We kind of have this image that they barely move. They actually don't. They can move several inches depending on where you're looking. One good example of that is watching somebody's calf who's got a really tight calf, and you watch them rise up onto the ball of their foot, and you'll see that gastroc like a whoop, really move an inch or 2, right, from its resting position to its active position. So that in mind, it's very important that those muscles are able to glide in an appropriate way against each other when they're doing their normal functional movement.
Yeah. And even if we just think of it from the physiologic standpoint, there's a lot of glide that occurs we go back, back to my physiology days when we talk about how muscles contract. You see that gliding, of the muscle tissue.
The filaments.
Gliding.
Actin-myosin.
Exactly. So we've always seen that. And when it comes to the fascial system, if anybody goes online, you can take a look on YouTube, or there's a ton of videos. If you just type in fascia, you'll see the hydration of the tissues, but you'll also see the different layers of fascia sort of sliding and gliding over one another within the tendon. And you can see how it needs to do that in order so that the muscle has a great excursion and it's not so short. Because if you think of all the tissues that are in there when it comes to arteries and nerves, veins, these are things that need to be able to move and stretch and glide and slide properly in order to have a lot of excursion for the muscle to actually contract. Because if you think about, if everybody just takes and lengthens their arm and then flexes their bicep and then shortens it, you can see that's quite a bit of excursion. That muscle actually comes up quite a bit. Like you said, the gastroc does. It has to in order to move the arm. So that tissue needs to have that amount of glide and slide to it.
And the ways that we develop, so we talked a little bit at the end of last session about scar tissue. We talked more specifically about like scars that come through to the skin.
Yeah.
But we also can create scar tissue within the bellies of the muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, this is a lot of where hypertrophy happens. Yes, some through building muscle tissue, some through building scar tissue within the muscle. So that can go either way. And sometimes that muscle, that scar tissue within the muscle can decrease the glide of the muscle at every level. I mean, both between the myofibrils, between the actual muscle fibers, and then between that muscle and the ones next to it. You think about lactic acid, right? That kind of post-workout aches and pains. Some of that is because you've got lactic acid buildup in the muscles and the myofascial tissue that is painful, apparently, when you move it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the other thing, too, about that glide is if, again, from the first time, we talked a bit about the proprioceptive system of the fascia. And what I say about that is, or what I mean by that is, a lot of how the body knows where it is in space, along with our Golgi tendon organs and our muscle spindle fiber, muscle spindles,
Yep.
is it knows it because of the change in water pressure between the layers of the fascia as the muscles move.
Okay.
Okay, so that tells the body how fast it's moving, how much the muscles are contracting, what direction it's going. Like that is a tremendously complicated system, and there is a huge number of nerve endings within the fascia all around the myofascial system.
Yeah.
So if you have, right, so if things aren't working well, if things are sticky, if things aren't moving well, if you're losing mobility in an area for whatever reason, that will decrease that proprioceptive feedback. It will decrease the coordination of the tissues. It will decrease the glide and the slide and the grace of your movement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just so someone who, we all have those clients who are very unbody aware. They seem
Yes.
to like have no proprioception as to where their body is in space whatsoever. For those clients, there may be a little bit less, I'm going to say, lack of communication within their own system. But even in a high-level athlete, when you get some scarring and you get something that's going to block some of that proprioception and some of that communication, that can lead to that hitch in your giddy up where you're going to see on one side they're not moving as smoothly, that the muscle may not be contracting as much. I was working with a client today who he's had numerous knee surgeries, and you can visibly see the scarring within the muscle. You can see where there's divots, where he's had some muscle removed, obviously, and other areas that have been sewn together. And he says he still feels a lot of knee pain, and I can see it. I'm thinking, well, there's still a lot of scarring going on there. That
Yeah.
is always going to be there because he wants it to feel like the other knee that's had no surgery. And I'm like, well, I don't think it's ever going to feel the exact same because, like I say, when I stretch it, when I see it contract, you can see a portion of it contract nice and smooth, and another part that seems to be flat, that seems to be not really communicating very well.
Yeah. Yep. That's classic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about is when there is that kind of damage, and it doesn't even have to be that major. That
Right.
sounds fairly major. But, I think about, we talked a little bit about this last time, think about post-pregnant women who've had a C-section. Again, what's that going to do to that whole system? Talking about somebody who's had liposuction and the way that that can scar the tissue down. So there's lots of things that can keep that glide from happening at a kind of major level and a more of a minor level. I think about there's an athlete that I worked with who was a throwing athlete. And one of the things, he was a pitcher. And one of the things about pitchers, and you'll see this if you ever see a slow motion shot of pitchers, is their external rotation in their shoulder.
Oh my gosh.
Is unbelievable.
Unreal.
Right? It's like the arm goes back and it's like the hand is down close to their waist or at least halfway through to their ribs.
Volleyball players too.
Right. So, yeah, anybody who does those kind of back and tennis players also oftentimes, right? They've got that same kind of for a serve, same thing. So that really changes the structure of the myofascia in the shoulder girdle. And generally, they will have a lot of external rotation and not a lot of internal rotation.
Do you find that is primarily just on that one side, or does it sort of cross over a little bit to the other side as well? Or is it just that's the side that's been trained for it so much that that's going to have that incredible range of motion and the other side is pretty much normal?
I find it's more on one side.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look at the back of a tennis player who's a serious tennis player, there is no symmetry on the two sides.
Sure.
The lat looks different. The trap looks different. I mean, everything I can see just on the surface level.
Yep.
Their hips are often different. Their waist looks different. If you look at the erector spinae along their spine, I mean, it can be radically different.
Baseball players too.
Anybody who's anybody who's a one-handed athlete or a primarily one-handed athlete, that fascial suit builds quite differently.
Yeah. Something that I will often, I'm going to take a little detour here for a second, but athletes that I have that are older, that still are participating, whether it be in something like golf, baseball, softball, something that is very one-sided, I will remind them to do things on the other side as well, because things like their spine has done that one rotation so many times in one direction that, yes, you've built your fascial suit to accommodate that one direction, but now they may be experiencing low back pain, or they may have some serious muscular imbalances where in their 40s they're now talking to them. That even just if they're a golfer, I'll say swing the golf club the other way just a few times every couple of holes. You don't have to make it perfect, just to unwind the tissues a little bit and remind the body how to recenter itself almost. And to a person, they all say, my golfers at least, it makes a huge difference. My baseball players and softball players swing the other way and they say, it feels so silly. I said, you're not trying to hit a ball. You're just trying to unwind those tissues and retrain your system a little bit. Yeah,
absolutely. Those are both really great examples, because I find, as a Pilates teacher, a lot of when I've worked with high-level athletes, especially not during their performing season, my job is simply to do the best I can to balance out the imbalances of their sport.
Yeah.
Work on their left side if they're right-handed, work on their torso rotation to the left if they rotate to the right, and just try to get things a little more even. Because again, to your point with your older athletes, those patterns get stuck. As long as you're staying fit and you're staying active and you're doing it, you may be able to tolerate that depending on your body structure. But there's often some point where like that imbalance starts to beat you up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it needs to be rebalanced at a certain point in one's life often.
Yeah. We had a very, very high level Olympic figure skater that was training out of my facility for a while. And it was interesting watching with the rotations, because he needed his body to rotate in one direction. And he was not doing quads, but he was doing triples and things. So he had to generate so much power. And he was primarily doing Pilates. And it was generating so much power and rotation, but it was only one direction. That's all he needed to focus on. And for someone like that, I was caught in a conundrum talking with the instructor that was working with him. I said, do you only train that one way because that's what he needs for his sport today, because he's going to Worlds in 3 months or whatever it is? Or do we train the other side as well to balance that out, to prevent down the road? There's a balance out there. Well,
I think periodicity or training clients, athletes like that. I know I've trained a lot of synchronized swimmers, particularly that were in competition season. That was kind of something I worked with a lot. A few skiers, some tennis players, a lot of golfers and stuff. And one of the things that I learned was during competition season, kind of don't mess with things.
Exactly.
I mean, I would give them a very balanced program, right? I mean, I would give them a very balanced program, but I'd be fairly bilateral symmetrical, letting the dominant side do whatever it's going to do, working on whatever skills they needed to
Yep.
maintain or to work on or strength or whatever. But I really wouldn't do a lot of correctives unless they were in that post-performance period. You know, if there was like a 2 months off or 3 months off when they're kind of recovering and doing that, that's when I would do any correctives I was going to do, which meaning correcting some of those habitual patterns from their sport.
Yep.
And then once they get back into competition season, it's like hands off.
Yeah. Yeah. I've dealt with a few coaches when I've had a couple of professional athletes of, various sports where the coach just says, I just need you to get them back on the field. I don't need you to do anything more than that right now.
Exactly. Yes.
You can deal with the other stuff later, but right now we need him back. So it's like, I understand. Yes, sir. Okay. So yeah, I could get that. So when it comes to scarring and things like that, we also see things like muscle tears where the scarring can be within the muscle itself, where you can literally see if it was a serious enough tear within the belly of the muscle. But we also have tears that occur within the tendons. And which
the
case,
musculotendinous junction.
Yeah, where, and there's various types where, they can go back surgically and there's enough tendon on both sides that you can overlap it and surgically repair it. Other times it pulls right out of the bone itself or pulls the bone with it. So there's various types of tears. And from the fascial point of view, we've been talking about trying to make sure everything sort of gets in alignment and everything. But in that sense, when we're talking about scar, we want to create scarring in that sense. We want that scarring to lay down heavies to create greater strength. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. You do. I mean, that scarring is useful. I mean, the body scars itself up because it's trying to close something that needs to be closed.
Right.
I mean, that's its job, whether it's a break in the skin or whether it's a break in a muscle. Scarring is designed to bring those ends back together, whether it's skin, whether it's bone or muscle tissue or tendon or anything, like any of the situations, you're trying to bring those ends back together and have them grow back, which is often a very complicated and kind of chaotic process for a while. And things don't always end up in the way that they used to end up.
Yeah.
Right.
And when things are healed, you often will hear someone say, well, it'll be stronger than it was before.
Right.
And in certain regards, like a broken bone, you can have that where the bone itself is going to grow and sort of fuse itself stronger in that one spot. Whereas in a ligament, though, you don't seem to have that, because there's no blood supply.
Right.
So you're not getting that regeneration. It's not a very
dynamic tissue. Yeah, blood and muscle are very dynamic tissues. Ligaments are not very dynamic tissues in that sense.
Yeah, but tendons that tear and you're able to surgically repair them, they will come back stronger than they did before because of that scarring.
Yeah, and because they're well innervated and they're well blood supplied.
Yeah.
Right. They're designed to heal. One thing that's interesting to bring up here, I think this would be a place to talk a bit about how you maintain that glide.
Yeah.
Right. So thinking about glide, a lot of this it's pretty simple, and yet it's simple, but you've got to commit to it. And what I say by that is you got to get multiplanar. You have to get out of the sagittal plane or whatever plane you typically work in. So ideally, you're really doing some multiplanar work, some rotational work, some lateral flexion, along with some flexion and extension, right? So making sure that all of the planes of motion are covered in your workout. I think that's a really critical piece that I find is missing on so many of my clients, that they just don't ever rotate. Like they just don't. And that means that those systems that are very important for functional movement, for sure, are not getting the nourishment that they need and not getting the communication that they need and not then getting the coordination that they need to work well.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot about three-dimensional movement and whole body movements, moving our body through space. And you said it perfectly, rotation is such a huge component of that. That gentleman I was talking about with the knee, a physical therapist, is who sent him to me because he had run out of ideas. He was just saying, you know what? There's nothing more I can do. I want you to work on as much closed chain, three-dimensional, full body. Let's see if that helps. So everything I do is all about trying to get him out of the sagittal plane, trying to get him into rotation so that his knee can stabilize from varying points of view. So no matter where he's going to have the force applied, his knee can stabilize.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how important that is.
I've worked a lot on that with any of my running athletes, my running cutting athletes, soccer players and that kind of thing, where absolutely they get so into their sport, which is, if they're just a runner, it can often be pretty sagittal. But if you really are a soccer player, it's like you're moving in all planes at all times. And recovery for them, especially after something like a knee or a hip or an ankle problem, is you have got to get them comfortable with those limbs going in those rather extreme ranges. External rotation and deep knee flexion on one side, or a deep lunge forward, or whatever it is. You've got to really work on getting those pieces comfortable and creating the support and the basic stability in all those other positions.
Absolutely. And also the confidence within the athlete, or when I say athlete, it could be, 45-year-old who's, just goes out once a week and, plays soccer, but blows his knee out. He wants to get back to it. He's got to be able to trust that knee. And we hear about high school students who never get back to where they were after an ACL. Professional players never get 100% back to where they were after an ACL or a meniscal tear or whatever. So it's getting that confidence back as well as training them from those, all those different angles, making sure that they're going to be able to cut, pivot, twist, lunge, squat, all those different movements that are required, constantly when you're out there playing.
And that's where glide, so multiplanar motion for sure, to get glide going. Also basically working on mobility. And by mobility, I don't just mean stretching in the more traditional sense or flexibility work, although that is absolutely fantastic, but also adding in the component of perhaps self-massage, myofascial release, roller work, ball work, those kind of things.
Yes.
Very often you can make progress, and I'm going to say this quite bluntly, you can make progress with a range of motion through stretching alone. It's a slow process.
Yeah.
I think it can be quite a slow process, but it's a slower process. If you combine that with either self-massage and myofascial release work or manual therapy, you can make much quicker progress on whatever issue you're trying to solve.
Yes. I've just discovered that a long time ago, that myofascial release has been crucial in getting people to get back after an injury. A client who literally left here earlier today was re-diagnosed with frozen shoulder. She never 100% recovered. And a lot of what we had to do was mobility work because things were still frozen. And I said, look, it's not just stretching. Yes, you need the active, but you need the passive as well, which is why you need someone who's good at body work and how to properly use a release ball or a foam roller to get the body to release what you need it to. And to do it properly, because too many people, I find, I'm sure you've seen the same thing when you're rolling your IT band, are just going up and down and up and down and up and down. They do it 10 times and they're done. It's like, well, you've ironed your pants really well. Other than that, you really haven't done a whole lot to the tissue itself, I find.
Well, let's dive into that. Because I think this is one of those topics that you will hear literally every possible viewpoint on.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to throw out several different things that I've learned from my years in looking at fascia. So one of the things is when you stimulate an area through touch. So if you roll over an area, whether it's with a ball or a roller or anything else or somebody else's hands, that is a neurological stimulation.
Sure.
Now that alone may allow that muscle tissue to relax and to lengthen. It might not, but it might. That is not a tissue change. That is a neurological change. Okay, neurological changes can be like, instantaneous more or less, but they're not necessarily going to last unless the tissue changes also occur.
Yep.
Right? So when I'm then thinking about, then the next layer on that is if I'm really doing some rolling, and this is where you get everything from the rumble roller with vibration to the melt roller, right? Like like very, very, very soft and gentle and relaxing and breathing, and very aggressive and
Yep.
kind of pounding your pulse. Yeah. Or pounding you to a pulp.
Yep.
So, so there is that whole range. And honestly, I'm not going to dive into my particular opinions about it. I think my experience has been different amounts of pressure work for different clients in different ways.
Yes.
Okay. Once again, I feel like that softer, gentler approach, like the melt method, allows some fluidity, perhaps some more hydration to come into the tissues, and some of that neurological change. Sometimes, though, the more aggressive response will actually help to break up some of the connections that have developed between different fascial layers, the skin and the muscles underneath it, or the muscles in each other, that are inhibiting the movement, which is a lot of what something like rolfing or structural integration do, right? Is they often will go in and really attempt to clear out some of those connections that are not in the proper direction, the proper place.
Yeah, and you see a physical therapist, they're going to go in deep. They're going to go in with their elbow. They're not doing it really. Exactly. The one I'm thinking of, my physical therapist is fantastic, but I've got an incredibly high tolerance for pain, and she about makes me jump off the table at times.
She goes over it.
But I got to say, it gets the job done. What I tell a lot of clients is, look, if it seems to be working for you, the harder foam roller, go ahead, use it. I have no problem with that. For the beginner, for someone who's just starting out, I find the softer one, they'll be more compliant to doing it on their own because they don't feel like they're hurting themselves as much.
Exactly.
The harder foam roller causes them too much discomfort, which causes their tissues to tighten up, so they never get to relax.
Yes.
So you use the softer one, and yes, it hurts at the beginning, but after about a week or two, they're like, oh, I can finally relax on this. And you know what? For some people, that's enough. They can actually get in and feel that the tissues are relaxing and that things are starting to release. Hey, if they're compliant and they're doing it at home, I'm happy camper.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of been my take, is it's like I give you a soft towards a kind of a medium roller to start with. If that works, fine, great. If we need to go up, there's many options in terms of going up and getting more intense about it. And again, that's client compliance, that's client pain threshold, and that's client stoicism, right?
Yes.
A lot of my athletes, it's like what I find in terms of a lot of my athletes and dancers too is they have tuned their body to tune out pain signals until they are like screaming.
Yeah.
Often. So their pain threshold is extremely high, which isn't always helpful for them, in all honesty. Sometimes they need to tune that down to get more subtle signals sooner before an injury actually occurs. But that's one of those things, right? That sometimes people need a lot of stimulation to get the response because they've really tuned out anything more subtle. Other clients are the other way around. Princess and the Pea feel absolutely every single thing that happens, are completely sensitive, and they need a more subtle approach.
I will suggest this too. Tell you a great story. I was in Seattle teaching. I was teaching a class on the knee. So, of course, the idea of the IT band release came up. And, of course, it is controversial. Now, a company that will remain unnamed, because they're not paying us, but a company that will remain unnamed was giving out free foam rollers. So everybody had these foam rollers in the class. And before the class started, I was watching how many people were rolling their IT bands. I said, oh, okay, interesting. So when this thing came up, I said, y'all have your little rollers with you, right? And people started raising them up. I said, great. I said, how many of you have been rolling your IT bands pretty regularly? Well, first I said, how many of you have tight IT bands? Every hand goes up. I said, okay, how many of you have been rolling with a firm, hard foam roller, for a while now, for at least 6 weeks? Every hand goes up. 6 months, every hand goes up. How many of you have been doing it for years? Almost every hand goes up. I said, shouldn't it be released by now? And you could just see the look in their eyes like, oh. And I said, if something doesn't seem to be working, why not try something else? And even for my athletes who like that harder, every once in a while, if I'm not seeing a result, I'll say, I want you to try with the softer one. And I want you just to hold that spot and just breathe and relax and let it go and let's have a conversation. And then after a little while, they're starting to see, oh, I can actually relax on this now. They'd actually taught their body how to withstand that much torture that they
Yeah.
were tight the whole time and tightened up. And it's like, okay. So my thing is, if one's not working, try another, because
Yeah.
it may be the
Absolutely.
individual, and it may be
Yes.
that your body's gotten used to one style or the other. Try something else and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, hey, you can always go back.
The thing I'll often say to bring that up again, because this is something I always ask people, is it's like, if you do myofascial release work once a week, nothing will change.
Yep.
It will hurt just as much this Monday
Every
as it did
time.
last Monday, right?
Yep.
So one of the things that, and again, this is one version, one study, but one thing that's come out of the fascial stuff is two things. One of the things that's happening there is a neurological piece. We talked a bit about that. The second thing that's happening there is dehydration and rehydration of the tissues.
Yep.
Right, that you're literally squishing water from one side. Think about a sponge, right? Your tissues have a lot of water in them, and by rolling it out, you're kind of moving water to one end and then moving water to the other end. And what was interesting was, according to some studies, it takes about 36 hours for your body to actually rehydrate after that process. So a lot of people suggest not rolling every day, but every other day.
Sure.
Because allowing the rehydration to happen, because some of the other theory of rolling is that you dehydrate the tissues, you push all the water out, or you push some water out, and when it rehydrates, it brings in fresh nutrients, fresh water, fresh whatever is necessary for those tissues.
Yep.
So you get a healthier tissue environment, basically. So that's another thing too, is it's like, so thinking about that every other day bit. And then also thinking that, I know, particularly the IT band, if you do it every week, again, once a week, you'll not get anywhere. 2 or 3 times a week, and you'll generally start to feel like it doesn't hurt as much every time.
Yep.
Right. And sometimes you'll find you get really to a place where it's pretty comfortable, and then you don't roll for a month or two, and you come back and you're better than you were at the beginning of your previous version. Some stiffness may have come back in, or some pain may have come back in, but not always.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where you've got to really play with frequency,
Yep.
tension, right? How much resistance, or what kind of roller tension you're using, and what you're working on.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what I tell people when I first start with them. I will say do it every day, but only because I know human nature. They're not going to do it every day.
Exactly. If you say every day, you're going to get, if you're lucky, you'll get 3 times a week.
Bingo.
I get that. Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely.
So, and then, I will modify that. And then, of course, when they stop hurting and everything's good, they stop rolling. And then when it comes back, you tell them, hey, have you been rolling? Oh, no, I forgot. Okay, let's get back on that.
Go back into it. Exactly.
And it starts feeling better again. It's like, hey, good. Now you know. And I do have a maintenance program for some people where when they do start feeling good, it's like, hey, even on my IT band, my knees and things, when it's bothering me, I do it more often. When it doesn't bother me as much, I'll hit it once a week. And I find that maintenance is fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's just maintenance at that point. And I don't need it as much. But when I need it, I up the frequency.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a tool, and it's an easy tool, right? And it's a wonderful tool that way. Now, one other thing I'll bring up here, because I've heard from so many people, you should roll in the IT band because one long argument I've had with some people is it's so strong, it won't do any good anyway. That's one argument. The other one is you can damage it. And I'm kind of like, okay, depending on how firmly you roll or whatever else, maybe you can. But those are diametrically opposed viewpoints on rolling out the IT band. So anyway, I just like to say that, my experience, and certainly there's been a ton of people who've been rolling IT bands out for decades that have neither caused damage, and have had that be effective. So I just like to bring that up in terms of just a very, very wide swath of the population finds this is not a problematic thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. My thing when I try and explain to people the reason why I want them to roll is I do explain that we want glide and slide between our tissues. And a lot of times the IT band and the quadricep especially can almost adhere to each other. They get these little fascial adhesions. And suddenly they're moving together instead of having that gliding motion. And that's when we see whenever that vastus lateralis contracts, we have that lateral pull of the patella a lot of times. And
Yep.
so I say when you find those hot spots, those could be those little fascial adhesions. And that's
Yep.
really what I'm trying to get rid of is if it's a rubber band with 20 knots in it, well, if you release 10 of those, guess what? Everything loosens up a little bit. And
Yep.
you may not get rid of all of them, but if you can just get things to slide and glide a little easier in that area, things seem to calm down. And to me, that's always made more sense to get rid of those fascial adhesions, and then things can move better.
Right, and that's where you have to be a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do some of that through just breathing on a soft roller, but some of that is a little bit of a mechanical process of actually breaking down those tissues to some extent,
Sure.
right? And that's just, again, it can be manual, it can be with a roller, whatever, but just understanding where on that spectrum you are.
Yep. Yep.
Now, one other thing about mobility, there's a lot of discussion also in mobility land about a long stretch versus a short stretch, a ballistic stretch versus a held stretch. Yin yoga, where you're holding for 3 to 5 minutes. Lots of different ways to think about that. And once again, I'm going to say one of those non-satisfying answers, and this depends on the body I'm working with.
Absolutely.
Some bodies absolutely love long stretches and tolerate them extremely well and do a great job with them. And they really can help their mobility and help them maintain their processes. Other people that I work with, particularly my hypermobile clients or my clients that are like, dancers and many of my yogis for that matter, can have so much mobility that for them to hold for that long disorients the muscle tissue, disorients the myofascial tissue.
Interesting.
I've seen that a few times, particularly in the shoulders. That it's like mobility work is not always something that I focus on for them. I really focus on strength, proprioception, awareness, lots of multiplanar motion. Because if I focus too much on mobility for them, they'll come out of the stretch and it's like they can't move their arm.
Right.
They can, but it's like it's lost that integration with the rest of the system.
Sure. I had a conversation when I was a baby trainer. I was just into this, and a physical therapist was also a trainer at night, did it part-time. And I was talking about stretching hamstrings, and of course my thing was more is always better and get them to go farther. And she just said, how functional is beyond 90 for your average person? And it was the first time, and of course I'm trying to argue with her, and then later on I'm thinking that's really true, that there is an optimum range of motion that every joint needs to have, or should have, doesn't need to, but should have. And going beyond that on a regular basis, or establishing your mobility beyond that for no real goal in mind. If it's for performance or whatnot, I understand that. But if it's not, it may lead to more dysfunction than function.
Well, especially if the body hasn't integrated that new length and doesn't know what to do with it.
Right.
Which gets us to the other piece, which is, we talked about glide, we talked about, myofascial release, but the other piece of that is coordinated motion. So multiplanar motion, motion that is, again, using the whole body. Also things like bouncing versus smooth,
We
right?
talked
Sort of
about
ballistic
that, yeah.
versus smooth, right? But those are really different ways to move, and those train the fascial system a little differently.
Well, that goes into that elastic recoil that we covered the last session, the last podcast. So why don't we get into that now, because that goes against a lot of what we had originally thought of in training, where they said don't ever bounce in especially a stretch, never bounce, and things, and all of that. But I'm also thinking, what if you're doing like jump squats? Well, aren't you just doing basically loading, exploding, loading, exploding, and you can do that in many different ways. Or a kettlebell swing. I mean, you're really loading tissues and exploding, and it's bouncing, but it's not jerky, and it's not, that, I don't know how to describe it, but that motion that is herky-jerky, I guess.
Yeah, that works. Yeah. So elastic recoil, we talked again a little bit about in our first session. Just a little brief review. Did we talk about the rat study?
I don't think we got into that study.
Okay. So this came out of this one study done with rats, and this always entertains me, so I have to tell the whole story. So what they basically did was they took a little biopsy of a rat's Achilles tendon, okay? And you can do that on a rat, not so like you do it on a human. And they looked at the organization of the tissues. And in a rat that wasn't jump trained, and I'll talk about that in a minute, the tissues were fairly chaotic. I talk about that kind of felty quality, right? They weren't really very organized. Then they did jump training. So what they basically did was have the rat's food kind of higher up, so the rat had to jump and hit a paddle so the food would come down, something like that, right? So they had to jump to get a reward. So the rats were jumping fairly regularly because that's how they fed themselves. And then they would do a biopsy. Then they did a biopsy of the tendon tissue after the rat had done their jump training, which again I find slightly hilarious. And what they found was that tendon tissue had completely reorganized to more like a crimp. So I think of it as knitted almost, if any of you are familiar with knitting, which many of you aren't. But basically it's kind of like a loop, like a valley and then a mountain and then a valley and then a mountain.
Ruffles have ridges.
There we go. Exactly. There you go. Thank you. There we go. The ruffles view. And that basically the tissues then organized in this more crypt-like fashion, which gave them more spring.
Yeah.
So this is the simple analogy I use is if you have a shirt that is a woven shirt, a woven cotton shirt, for example, and you pull it and it doesn't have any, lycra in it, it won't stretch much.
Right.
Right? Because those fibers are felt, doesn't stretch either. If you've got felt anywhere, that doesn't stretch either. But you think about a knitted sweater, or you think about a knitted item of clothing for fitness, which is a whole lot of knits in fitness, that has flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of that crimped quality of the tissues and of the material that allows it to have that ability to expand and contract.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So, excuse me, the same thing apparently happens in humans. When we go out there and start jumping around or running or anything that's kind of ballistically timed in terms of the body, walking will not do it. Swimming will absolutely not do it. But something like, running, jogging, jumping, something in that range, the reformer, footwork on there, the shuttle, the footwork on there, where you really are moving and you're pushing off the foot and you're landing and you're pushing off and landing with a certain timing.
Right.
That's a critical piece. And, those of you joining us at home, you can stand up and play with this yourself. So if you stand up and you jump and you find a rhythm that you can maintain that jump, right? Jump, 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 whatever your speed is.
Pogoing.
It's not that hard. What?
Like a pogo.
Like a pogo, right? It's not that hard. You kind of bounce, 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 bounce. Excuse me a second.
So yeah, my wife and I joke all the time that when we go to that music, a lot of times nowadays, if you listen to it, the popular stuff is almost stuff that you can pogo to, things that you can just go boing, 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 go up and down and up and down. And it's very interesting that that's become one of those interesting, things that, like I say, in popular music, we see it. And it's something that in classes you could actually create you could really put that into your group exercise type class where you're doing more of that jumping. What I noticed with my clients, I started them on some jump training, is it's very uncomfortable for a lot of them. It's incredibly uncomfortable. On the shuttle is one thing because you can get them into that rhythm, but as soon as you take them into a gravity laden environment, even having them just jump up to something that's 2 inches tall. I mean, it's not that much, or an inch. You see this weird, giddy up sort of thing where they can't really get into it and they have to almost be retrained. It's something that neurologically they can't seem to figure out. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely. No, that rhythm is critical. For jumping, that rhythm is absolutely critical. And for elastic recoil, what they found is that, let's say somebody is jumping at a good rhythm. What happens is their body is actually responding quicker than their muscles or their neurological system would allow.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, there's an energy storage in the tendons that then gets released quicker than the nervous system or the muscles will allow.
Nice. And almost any body part can be trained in this fashion, because let's just think about a tennis serve. Let's think about
Yeah.
serving a volleyball. Let's think about throwing a ball. You're coming back and then you're coming forward. So you're loading those tissues and then you're exploding. You're loading and you're exploding. Same with a jump. You're going into a squatted position. You're loading the calves, the quads, the hips, and then exploding off of that. And again, doing it in a rhythm, in a method that would be more rhythmic for a squat could be something like the kettlebell swing, where you don't have to use anything heavy. You can just sort of get into that, that motion and get into that rhythm.
Right. So that's one way to think about training the tissues for elastic recoil.
Yeah.
Is adding, adding swings, adding jumps, adding things where you're winding up the tissues and you're releasing, and you're winding up the tissues and you're releasing. Kettlebell's great for that. Band work can be great for that. Jumping can be great for that. Excuse me a second. One of the teachers that I worked with on this, Robert Schleip, worked with a man who was an Olympic coach for runners in Canada. And they talked a lot about how important that spring is for runners, right? That they've got to be able to spring off the ground. And that spring has that's what actually creates the speed and the timing.
Absolutely.
Not anything else. And they would do things like exactly that. They would have them run, and they'd have them really work on just that spring piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that really allowed them to have a lot more pliability and a lot more speed and resilience. The other thing too is if you ever watch somebody do parkour.
Yep.
Right. In that case, they're jumping and landing in lots of different ways, again, in lots of different angles, different distances. And that would be a classic elastic recoil training.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jumping from here to there, jumping over here, landing here, but then landing, with your feet spread this way, jumping up onto your hands. All of those things are going to have some of that elastic recoil quality.
Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting. In the last little while, I've been playing with a new piece of equipment, which is based on centripetal motion. You see these all online and things like that. And I played with one a long time ago. And so I thought, I'll get one for my studio. It was inexpensive. And it basically, the harder you pull it out, it wants to pull you back in. So you go to the end range and then it's sort of, it's two discs, weighted discs that, you wind it up like a yo-yo, you pull it, and then it pulls you back in. You pull it.
Uh-huh.
But what's interesting is how I want to use it is in more of a sense of rhythm, for a one-arm pull. So I'm pulling and then back and pulling and back. And I find this nice rhythm and I do it for 30 or 40 seconds. And I do the other side. And with my body, especially because the harder you pull, the harder it pulls you back. It's pulling me back. So I'm getting all the resistance in the eccentric contraction. And I'm pulling with the concentric, but it's that rhythmic sense that really feels almost like a dance.
Yeah.
And I'm getting clients to do it and they love it. They're like, this feels really good. And they can't tell you why. It's like, and I said, it's the rhythm. And they say, yeah, it just feels really good to do this. And I mean, you can do it with a band, you can do it with anything you want. But I sort of rediscovered this just by playing on my own body and saying, this feels really nice. So it's interesting.
I love that. That's really exactly what you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful way to work the glide and the elastic recoil and the strength and everything else in a really dynamic, integrated, coordinated way. Fabulous. Love it.
Yeah. So it was just one of those things that, like I said, I just started playing with it and I'm like, I'm going to play with this for a couple of months and see how my body responds and put it in with clients here and there and see how their bodies respond. But it was very interesting that how many clients were saying it feels good. And that was sort of my aha moment. It's like, okay, this feels good. I like that. So training that elastic recoil in a different way. And again, because I was using this machine, and again, you can use bands, you can use other things. It was a way that I could use instead of just trying to do, like I said, kettlebell swings is the one we always talk about to train this, but I was able to do it with rowing, with pressing, with chops, high and low chops, even with straight arm pull downs. And you see this with people use, I forget, it's like a ski ergometer that's straight upright. And you can see them pulling straight arm, Basically, they're doing straight arm pull downs, but they're getting into a rhythm. And I'm like, interesting. So it's really neat that you can see that rhythmic motion feels good and is easier to train than you think.
And that's something, you guys can incorporate that into just your work with clients.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I think a lot about in terms of Pilates is relatively traditional Pilates keeps a rhythm. Like it'll take a mat class and you really won't stop. You'll keep flowing from one thing to the next, the next, the next, to the next. More contemporary and more rehab-oriented Pilates often kind of breaks things up or breaks things down. There's a little piece of this and then a little piece of this, a little piece of this. And one of the things that I just encourage you to find is the flow. Like do not, I find for any of us who are very detail-oriented teachers, which I'm sure some of you are out there, it's easy to lose the forest for the trees. But the forest is really important. Just the movement, the flow, having the client find the flow, whatever exercise it is, moving in, moving out, finding it to be fluid and organized. That's a really effective way and a really useful way to think about the myofascial training is just find those rhythms in whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And help your client to find those rhythms.
And except for group exercise and fitness, it's not really talked about much.
No.
You know, because everything is isolated, everything is body part oriented or machine oriented, and you really don't get into those rhythms nearly as much as you do in like a dance, a group exercise, or Pilates, or even some flow yoga classes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just something to think about, as you start to train people. The thing too is, add some jumping in for people.
Yeah.
And honestly, and the reformer is fantastic for that because you put the jump board on, you can take the weight as light as you need to, and just start to work on getting those pieces going. And like Brian, clients can't jump for beans. I mean, most of them really have if they have never done that in the past and it's not something they've trained, they're terrible at it.
Yeah.
But it's a very useful skill to develop, and you can just think about how that that gets the fascia going in a little more healthy way.
And if you think about, especially for our older clients, we need to work on power. We need to get them to be able to, because they're going to be in a situation where they're crossing the street and a car is going to be coming and they need to move quickly. So they need to have that speed or that power to be able to push off quickly to get the heck out the way.
Exactly.
So it is functional as well.
Yep. Yeah. So to wrap up, we've talked a bit about, again, elastic recoil, doing rotation, adding that concentric, eccentric, or reciprocal action with resistance. I love that. Mobility, thinking about, again, what are you doing with your mobility? Are you doing it through yoga, through flexibility, through myofascial release? Thinking about the glide, and then thinking generally about that coordinated whole body motion and having to get the whole body to work together. That I find is, I have a couple of clients in their 70s that I'm working with, and man, that's the hardest thing. Everything is kind of, you see the breaks in the kinetic chains. Like it just kind of dies here and then it dies there and then it ends up over there. And the more I can get those flows going, the better they feel.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I'm going to add to that is be patient. This is going to take time. We talked about fascia restructuring or reorganizing. Takes time, 6 to 18 months, maybe longer, depending on the person, depending on their hydration, depending on what they do with it. I mean, if they're only training with you once a week and sitting on their butt the rest of the time, don't expect their body to change very quickly. It's going to take time. Right. For our athletes, it may be a little bit quicker. So just be patient. Don't think, wow, it's been 10 sessions and, I'm not seeing a lot of change yet. Be patient. It's going to take time.
Exactly.
It's going to take time.
Absolutely. It really does take time. Rebuilding our fascial suit takes a long time and a lot of work, honestly. It's not something that's going to happen on its own. It's not going to magically be different.
Exactly.
Like with, honestly, everything we do in fitness. There aren't magic bullets. People always want them, and we still don't have them.
Yep. No magic bullets here. No. Well, we covered a lot today. We covered a lot.
We did.
A lot on training the fascia. And again, this is a topic we will cover again, I promise, because there's so much that's coming out on a regular basis. And the more we know, the more we can sort of be better at how we train our clients. The more information we have.
And we also just always hope that whatever we plant in your brain just sparks some ideas, sparks some ways of thinking about the body, ways of thinking about movement, ways of thinking about your clients that maybe you've thought about and forgotten about, or maybe you just haven't thought about.
Yeah.
So that's also our goal, is just to give you some inspiration along the path.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on Moving Conversations. Hopefully this did spark some thoughts and questions, and you'll be questioning, things. And if you do have questions, hey, reach out to us. We got a couple of emails this week talking about, hey, would you like to, how about covering this topic or that topic? And guess what? For that person who does have something specific that said that they wanted to cover tennis elbow, guess what, gang? We're going to be covering it. Or golfer's elbow is what she wanted. We're going to be covering it in the next couple sessions. So don't worry. It's on the horizon. Don't worry. So if you have a topic you want to discuss, drop us a line. movingconvos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. And if you like the show, please give us a 5-star review, subscribe so it's in your inbox every week. And until next time, keep on moving, guys.
Bye.